Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about the news of Nick Fuentes' show being banned again by Spotify after it surged to the number one spot. But before we do that, please remember to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Rumble, also available in podcast form on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the website. It's real easy. Just your name and email, and you'll get email notifications when I have new articles that are live and podcasts. So yeah, please subscribe. So I did an article today on the website, therightwingpopulist.com, and for those who don't know who Fuentes is, he's a kind of a far right guy, very popular among Gen Z and millennials. He's sort of a self-described right-wing reactionary, and he's been on the scene really for almost 10 years now. Since 2017, he had a show on right-wing broadcasting, RSBN, right side broadcasting, and he became prominent very quickly because he's a very talented guy. There's no question about that. Whether you like Fuentes, you don't like Fuentes, he's very talented. He's very charismatic. And he's very knowledgeable. Like, he's well-read. So he very quickly became popular, even though he holds views that are pretty taboo. There's no question about that either. He's talked about how he's against interracial marriage. He holds some very traditional views when it comes to things like he's very much against homosexuality, very pro-life. He's a Catholic. He holds those type of, social views. But unlike other Catholics, he really, he's a stickler, let's say, about him. And because of the fact, and he's very much, and probably the biggest thing is his stance on Israel. He's been a huge critic of Israel, and that's probably what got him to the crossfires the most over the years. He says when he was really up and coming, that he had basically more or less a job offer to work for the Daily Wire, but essentially one of the things that hinged on him getting the job was to not be critical of Israel. And Fuentes wasn't going to do that, obviously. So he didn't get the job, and, he ends up being censored and from YouTube and other platforms. And he was pretty much censored from everywhere. So I'm going to read you some of my article just to give you more of the breakdown of what happened, and then I'm going to discuss why censorship just doesn't work and why it's bad for the country. So let's start here. Nick Fuentes' show was briefly reinstated on Spotify this week and quickly surged to the number one trending show. But it didn't last long. After just 2 days, the platform once again removed his program. And as you can see here, this was a screenshot when the show was still live on Spotify. It surpassed Joe Rogan. Ironically enough, it surpassed Candace and Tucker Carlson. That doesn't mean it was literally a top show. It was just the show that was growing the fastest. That's what those trending numbers really mean, just for the full context. For those unfamiliar, Nick Fuentes is a young right-wing commentator popular among Gen Z and millennial audiences. He's a self-described right-wing reactionary as he advocates for a Catholic nation and is sharply critical of Israel and immigration. Not just illegal immigration, but just immigration, period. Given those views, it's not hard to see why Fuentes makes many people uncomfortable, not just on the left, but within the right as well. Prominent conservative commentators such as Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro have all criticized Fuentes over the years, accusing him of being anti-Semitic, as racially divisive. Carlson even dismissed him as a Fed, calling him some gay dude in his basement, which is kind of funny, To be fair, Fuentes has been seen around some cat boys, make of that what you will, but, Fuentes has faced extensive censorship since he emerged on the scene in 2017. His YouTube channel was permanently banned, he's been denied service by multiple banks, and he's become one of the most deplatformed political figures in America. And, it goes on to give some more of the context of what I said. Censorship doesn't really work, though, because Fuentes is as popular as ever. In fact, he's more popular now. There's no question about that. Fuentes is on what, he self-describes as a generational run. He was just on Patrick Bet-David's show. He was on Dave Smith's show. which, by the way, I believe was Dave Smith's most viewed podcast, at least on YouTube. It had over 1 million views. He was on Candace's show, even though that was contentious. But the censorship hasn't worked against Fuentes. He's as popular as ever. There's no question about that. And he's on Rumble now, and Rumble is a free speech platform. This show is now available on Rumble. Please check it out. Should be live on Rumble later today. And he's getting millions of views on Rumble now. And he doesn't have the constraints that he had when he was on YouTube. So, what was the point of doing all this censorship against him? And he was censored on Twitter, too. It wasn't until Elon bought X, or, he bought Twitter and it became X. He later reinstated Fuentes, which was, I think a good thing. And, when you make something a taboo, people sort of inherently become fascinated with it. And Fuentes became taboo as someone to listen to and to be a follower of. There's no question about that. And, it's not just, you see this in other examples. You see it with Trump. Famously, as you can see here, Trump was suspended on Twitter after January 6th. After January 6th, not only was Trump suspended on Twitter, as you can see on your screen, he was also censored on YouTube. He was censored on Facebook. Many banks also didn't want to associate it with Trump. Trump called it, an exile. Trump was basically exiled for 4 years. But it didn't work. 4 or 5 years later, he's now president again. So how did that work out? It didn't. Censoring views from prominent people who are charismatic and popular, that doesn't work. People want to hear from those people, even if they don't agree. I don't agree with a lot of I don't agree a lot with what Nick Fuentes says. I'm not against interracial marriage. One of the first girls I ever got intimate with was a black girl. Shout out to her, sweet girl. Forget her name, but hope she's doing well. Not too well, but doing well. There's nothing wrong with interracial marriage, but Fuentes holds a view that, he wants his children to look like him, and that's fine. I don't agree with that in principle, but I don't think he should be censored for holding that view. I think he should be criticized, but I don't think he should be censored. And honestly, the biggest reason why he's been censored so much is because of his views on Israel. Now, he goes beyond just being critical of the country of Israel. I want to be clear about that. I do think it is fair to say he is anti-Semitic. He does not like Jews. Okay, it's not just he doesn't like Israel. Lots of people don't like Israel who aren't anti-Semitic. Fuentes is anti-Semitic. Okay, he thinks Jews are the problem. He thinks Jews run society in a literal way. And he's not being joking. He's not joking. But he also basically denies the Holocaust. Or he'll say, he's not sure exactly what happened. So I don't agree with any of that. I think that's wrong. But again, I'm not for censoring it. I want to hear taboo ideas from people. It's interesting. It keeps the political dialogue interesting and fresh. And it doesn't work. Again, Fuentes is more popular than ever. He's on his generational run. There's rumors that he's going to be on Tucker Carlson's show soon, if Alex Jones is to be believed. So what did all this censorship gain? I mean, look, in the short term, yes. Did less people hear from Fuentes in the immediate aftermath of him being censored on YouTube and Twitter? Yeah, sure. Of course. But in the long term, what did we get from censoring him? He's more popular than ever. Especially now that Charlie Kirk's gone, all these young people now are just going to be going to him. And the fact that he was so heavily censored, it's part of his story. It's him basically overcoming the machine, the establishment. He became basically a martyr. If you don't like Fuentes' views, is that good that he's become a martyr? Is that good that he's become sort of a representation of the fight against the machine, the establishment? No, it's not, if you really don't agree with his views. And again, I agree with some of his views. I don't agree with lots of them, but I agree with some of them. And, when it looks like the system is going after Fuentes, particularly for his views on Israel and Jews, it leads people down a road to think, well, maybe Fuentes is right about the Jews. Maybe the Jews are the problem. And again, to be clear, I'm on Spotify. I don't think Jews are the problem. I don't like Israel, but I have no problem with Jews. But again, Fuentes should be allowed to say that if that's what he thinks. And the fact that we're still having platforms like Spotify, again, I like you, Spotify, keep my show on the platform. But the fact that we have prominent platforms like Spotify who, after like 2 days, caves and, takes Fuentes' show off the platform, it's just kind of pathetic. It's like, man, we're adults. Adults should be able to listen to whatever the hell they want. Fuentes has never, as far as I can tell, has never advocated for violence directly. Okay? He's just like a Catholic who believes in traditional values, who holds views about race that I do not agree with. Again, I do think he is anti-Semitic. He has self-described him as racist or as a racialist, whatever distinction you want to make between those two. But he should be allowed to say what he wants without being the fear of being deplatformed. Because look, a lot of young people, whether you like it or not, a lot of young people look up to Fuentes. And I'd rather Fuentes be the channel that they're able to voice, the young people are able to voice their frustration, versus them having no outlet. That could lead us down a bad road. I don't think I have to go into the details of what that means exactly, but let Fuentes be, let him be the conduit for the frustrations of a lot of young white men. There's nothing wrong with that. Young white men have been screwed in this country over the last 50 years. Their interests have not been looked after by the establishment. That's why Trump came to power. Because even though Trump didn't explicitly say this, when Trump talked about the forgotten man and the forgotten woman, he was talking to, working class white people, especially in 2016. There's no question about that. And I don't think that's racist or anything, but I do think that's what it was, at least in part. So I'm against censorship. I hope Spotify does the right thing again and reinstate Fuentes on the platform. Again, I don't agree with him on, again, I'm not racist, I'm not anti-Semitic, and I do think Fuentes is those things. But I'm an adult. If I want to listen to him, I'm going to fucking listen to him. I don't need the big tech oligarchs to tell me who I can or can't listen to. We're not about that, so. Spotify, get Fuentes back on the platform. It's the right thing to do. Last thing I wanted to talk about briefly is, speaking of Israel, the ceasefire that we have, it's looking a little shaky. Both sides are now accusing, both Palestinians or Hamas and Israel are now accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. Israel is saying Hamas isn't giving the dead bodies up, of the remaining dead bodies of the hostages. They're not giving them back fast enough. Hamas is saying that Israel's not allowing in the proper amount of aid that was promised. So the ceasefire is maybe looking a little shaky. Hopefully things work out. I think Trump will make sure it works out, though. I don't trust either side. I don't trust Israel. I don't trust Hamas. But hopefully Trump's at least able to keep Israel in line, and that the Arab countries like Qatar and Egypt are able to keep, in Iran, I guess, are able to keep, or Iran, are able to keep Hamas in line. So fingers crossed. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe again, whether it's on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or again, subscribe on the website. It's real easy. Thanks for listening, folks. Bye-bye.